Good morning. Good morning, Milwaukee. Thank you for joining us today. I am Nancy Hernandez with the Hispanic Collaborative. Very happy to be here with you today and happy that you could join us. We have some fantastic programming lined up today. You have heard us at our last community working group meeting share some of the statistics that our research teams were uncovering with the research in the community over the last 4 months of 2020. And today we want to hear real stories because the truth is that this pandemic has hit our community very hard, not just in Milwaukee, not just in Wisconsin, but all over the United States. And while the world is opening up, we see a relaxation, vaccines are getting out there, we still have real economic and health hardships happening in our communities, and that's something that we want to ensure we stay close to. We thought the best way to do that was share some real stories today from Latino households, from Latino businesses, and certainly from Latino college students. All of these are an important part of our future as well as Milwaukee's future. So thank you for joining us today. We're happy if you're going to join us all the way through 1 o'clock, or if you have a few select sessions that you want to listen to today, we're happy for whatever time you can give us. So this morning we have our first session. We're going to go ahead and start our first session. And I am very excited about the individual who's joining us today. So I will share that when we started the Hispanic Collaborative, when we went through the process of bringing Latinos together and looking at the research that was done by the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, one of the things that we did was devise what is now the Hispanic Wellbeing Index as a way to understand how Latinos here in Milwaukee were doing against Latinos in other metros and other cities. And we did this as a way to understand which cities really were performing well, which cities had quick and improved performance in their Latino outcomes, because we wanted to study them and understand, were there some things in common happening in these cities, or the Latino infrastructure or way of doing things in these cities that we might be able to replicate here. Minneapolis was one of those cities that we looked at. And we looked at key organizations in those cities and what they were doing and what impacts they were making. And that's the first time that I came across this organization. We have the executive director of HACER here today, and we're going to hear about HACER and Rodolfo Gutierrez through his unique lens of this organization that I'm very excited you're going to get to learn some things about, will help share with us the importance of Latinos to overall prosperity and give you a lens that of what he sees in Minneapolis, but also from what he understands as his organization interacts with philanthropic world, with corporate world, and with the community as well. So I'm excited to bring you HACER, and I know that HACER was born out of a community fund development grant in Minneapolis, and that's a pretty exciting thing too, when Latinos understand in their community what is needed and have resources and power to help fill those gaps and put organizations like HACER together. So I'm going to have Rodolfo join me on screen. Good morning, Rodolfo, ¿cómo estás?
Good morning, gracias, todo bien. Good morning, everyone.
So thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited to have you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up your PowerPoint, and then I will ask you a couple questions to help get us started. So let me go ahead and do that. There we go.
Awesome.
And hopefully everyone can see that. Yes, thumbs up. So Rodolfo, the first question that I have is, as I kind of explained, HACER is a very unique organization. Not very many like it exist. You're kind of part think tank, part research organization, part voice of community, part policy analyst, really. So can you share more about what HACER is with our audience today? Why was it created, and what hole are you really filling today?
Sure. Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, we are HACER. I'm gonna tell you, HACER is a short name for what you read below, which is Hispanic Advocacy and Community Empowerment Research, a very long name for a very small organization. And we are unique in the sense that we are a nonprofit focused on research, particularly on Latino, Hispanic issues in the Midwest. We are among only 5 other organizations in the entire country with the same kind of design and characteristics. And to that point, HACER also has been in the air, so to speak, for over 35 years now. Initially created in 1988 as previously to have 1988 as a small kind of attempt to give answers to several questions related to why, what, and how to work with the Latino communities from CLUES. Back in time, it was Comunidades Unidas Latinas en Servicio. And today, back in time it was Chicanos Latinos Unidos en Servicio, Chicanos Latinos United in Service, and today is Comunidades Unidas Latinas en Servicio, so it's changed its name. But in that time, they figured out that there were so many questions that needed answers, particularly related to what it is the cause of the problems that we were working on, or people were working on. So if we can go to next slide, please. We have our website there. You can read a little bit more about our history, but I can tell you in 1988, HACER became a program within CLUES, and it was formally created under the alliance of several organizations, among them the University of Minnesota, Metropolitan State University here in St. Paul, McAllister College, and was funded for the community grant from Minneapolis Foundation. And as a program, was fed by students and professors from the University of Minnesota and some other places as well. From there, Paul Corrizales, who was the program director, worked from the office that was assigned to that in the University of Minnesota. So we started being unique from the beginning because we were within the university, but we were working with the community. In 1997, Paul Corrizales decided that it was the demand too big, so it became a nonprofit organization, autonomous and independent, but still with the support of the University of Minnesota. By 2007, I came on board. I was here in Minnesota a little bit by accident. I was coming here for me to study my PhD in history at the University of Minnesota. Next slide, please. And I am, Nancy, next slide, please. I am originally from this small city in Mexico. It's Mexico City, one of the largest cities in the world. And I came here like in the middle of what everybody was saying, nowhere, because the closest city from here that it is considered important is Chicago, 8 hours away from here. Not the same way as it is in the rest of the universities, campuses that are considered important. But I am really happy to be here in Minnesota. And since then, I realized that here in Minnesota, we do have a very small but very participative and very committed community of Latinos who are always upfront in so many ways. But also, we do have a community that it is diverse. It is wide, really reflecting all the diversity of our countries, but also within our country. So that said, is when I engage with HACER, I enter to a world in which I understood what it is the importance of working with the Latino communities as HACER does, and the way it does. Bringing research, bringing evaluations, bringing elements to the community for them to advocate for themselves, because that is important based on research. And we engage into community-based participatory research. Next slide. And to bring new kind of stereotypical images from Latinos. It is not that we are, say, community that waits for something to happen, but I see that we need to make things happen. That's why we do have some sort of interaction directly with the community. And this image of the Laborinqueña, which is the image of the superwoman in Puerto Rico, comes very nicely to the idea of empowering our community. That's why you said in my presentations is what we are trying to do. In HACER, we try to empower our community in the way that we can, next slide, also break down some images that are not necessarily representing us, but rather images like this. I don't know if you know this series of TV. I'm gonna let you guess the name of it, but it's about a woman who goes against the stereotypical images. She's originally from Venezuela, where the grandma is from Venezuela. 3 generations here who are changing the way in which things work. So we try in HACER to contribute in generating this kind of new images from Latinos and not the traditional image that is generally presented everywhere around. Next slide, please. So HACER, I was telling you, we were born in 1988, and we also work not only with Latino communities, but we try to engage with diverse communities in the state and beyond. Currently, we are working even in a study that involves agricultural workers in North Dakota, and we are working with people in northern Iowa. And very soon, we're going to be visiting you and to work with people in Wisconsin. But we are trying to bring communities to have access and generate and disseminate credible and relevant research in order to influence institutions' decisions and public policy. That is our goal. And to do that, we have a team of currently around 17 people who are working, next slide, as research associates or people who are coordinating outreach. As I had to mention that we do research evaluation and also outreach, and we do work with the Minnesota Department of Health and other agencies here in order to bring resources to the Latino community. And this is the team that makes these things possible. A very diverse team as well, very important, but mostly composed by Latino minds and people who are working in concert with the needs of our Latino population in Minnesota. I repeat, we are small, 5.5% of the entire population, but we are really important. So that's why we are working here.
So Rodolfo, I think some of what you shared, I find fascinating, and I really respect and think, there's a great need for the approach that you take, and I certainly think it helps present the voice of Latino at a lot of different tables in order for you to share the stories and share what resources are needed and how really people can make an impact. So kudos to you and your team for doing this. And I'm very excited that you are looking at Wisconsin. I think we have a lot of similarities here and would love to see how we can continue to work together on some of these key projects and address some of the issues that I think Latinos both in Minnesota and Wisconsin share. So I'd love for you to share with the group today what types of organizations use HACER and how do you help those clients in turn better serve, understand, and ayudar el comunidad Latino? Have you noticed changes in the time frame that you've been at the helm of HACER in your clients of what they're looking for? Are you helping them get smarter in some ways in the questions and the type of information that they seek? And then have you found a greater need for your services and the value that you provide?
Sure, thank you, Nancy. Yes, we're gonna be there in Wisconsin, and even though I am Vikings fan, and Wisconsin is Green Bay's fan, I think we can work together, but that is going to be the minimum issue. Thank you for the question. And HACER, next slide, please, engage in so many ways with many different organizations. We work both under grants that we write together with either nonprofit organizations or community-based organizations, or even governmental offices who are trying to find some answers to different questions. And therefore, we have initial kind of stages in which we come together, talk about the issue, we develop the proposal and bring it to the founders or foundations, and we start working collaboratively speaking. The idea of community-based participatory research is always there. We participate with our so-called clients and our community members in order to build capacity. Secondly, we do have also contracts. Sometimes offices from any department here, like Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Education, they have specific assignments, and they look at us as the ones who can go and make it possible. So they hire us, and they give us some money to develop our projects that also are translated into community-based participatory research or evaluation projects, where we engage the community members to work with us. Finally, we do have some contracts that come out from private organizations. They are more as important as the other ones, but they are not as numerous as the previous ones. But still, there are some organizations who are interested in learning more about the Latino community in Minnesota. And because of that, they look at us in order for us to generate reports and more knowledge about those specific communities. Today, we do have this kind of previous experience. We work in Race to Equity, which is a project combined by the city of Minneapolis and the police department of Minneapolis, in order for us to learn what it is needed from the perspective of Latino communities to reach equity in the city. But also, and that is was really intense for over 3 years, we did outreach for the census counting, and we were under contract with the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. So private money put me there to work towards learning about how people can be counted. And we developed with the hands of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, which is located in Rochester, Minnesota, a project that it's Creando Ando, that it is focused on, based on research, developing some kind of training for people or for them to develop their own projects for businesses. So empowering people to develop their businesses and based on what is their specific needs sets for them to really be successful. And finally, and just a couple of examples, we do have so many other projects we have done in the past. The Ramsey County Racial Equity and Community Engagement Response Team, or REDCERT, they are interested in working with people living in the Ramsey County, which is side in Hennepin County, the composing both together the metro area here in Minnesota, in order to bring the Latino community to learn about resources and actions that have to be taken for them to be in good standpoint to respond to the needs under COVID-19 crisis. So, and then that also was linked to our largest project, that it is us working with is happening today. That's why it's not here listed, but we are working with the Minnesota Department of Health for the last year and this year and the following year, I hope, in order to create more awareness and deep knowledge about the specific needs that our different communities in Minnesota have. So those are the previous projects we had. And next slide, please. We are currently handling over 36 projects that are different. I was talking about this COVID-19 Community Coordinator Program, that it is with MDH. We are one out of 3 Latino organizations who are working with MDH, bringing vaccines, identifying where the vaccines are needed, bringing experts to talk about COVID-19 vaccine and more. And we are coordinating with local health service providers in order for them to attend or respond to the needs of Latino communities around. We are almost closing, but still working on the Austin Area Minority Business Project. Is a partnership with the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota and a local agency on business development for us to identify immigration as, and business development. So the idea is to see owners who are immigrants of businesses and see what is the product they might need, combining immigration law or immigration statuses or immigration say plans or programs, plus learning how to develop their businesses. We are evaluating this project, and it's been so successful that we are at the stage we are going to be replicating it. And one of the cities we want to work in, seems like it's going to happen pretty soon, replicating this project is Cedar Rapids in Iowa. We are collaborating with the University of Minnesota, developing a study on cervical cancer with Latino women. And at the same time, we are working on a beautiful project on the oral history of Lake Street that comes very timely today because after the mobilizations that came out as a consequence of the murder of Mr. George Floyd, Lake Street was deeply affected. Several businesses being Latino owned were affected. So we are working on this project in order to help them recover their businesses. And you can see here another businesses, mirrors, that it is pretty much what we are going to be replicating in Wisconsin, is the agricultural workers needs assessment. And finally, and I guess it's important, the Safe Roads to Healthy Foods is a combination between funding from the city of Minneapolis and a couple of agencies are interested in learning more about the cultural approaches to access to food from Latino communities and actually diverse communities like Hmong communities, African American communities, and immigrant African communities in Minneapolis. Pretty much, and we are engaging into study, replicating a study we did in 2001. And this is related to what is the impact, economically speaking, of the undocumented labor force in the state of Minnesota. And we are working for that in collaboration with Region 9 from the Department of Employment and Economic Development, University of Minnesota, and Blanding Foundation and Northwest Area Foundation. So pretty much those are the projects we are working on, and we are trying always to work, as I insist, and I guess it's worth saying it, cooperation, coordination, and building capacity with our Latino communities. I can just tell you very quickly, one of our participants in one of our previous projects came out like he was finishing his high school. And then after the project, he said, you know what, I know what I want to be in my life. And currently he is a lawyer who's working on immigration offices. And it is one of the best ones we do have. And I am really glad that he said that he is a lawyer because he worked with us in one of our projects. I don't know if I answered your question, Nancy.
No, yes. So, what I heard, Rodolfo, and thank you so much. It sounds like, I mean, we have, emergency pandemic pieces here. We have health related pieces. We have business development pieces. What I heard, some of the overarching themes that I heard that your work addresses here are really, what are those elements to create a thriving environment? How are we understanding those and helping bring those together and replicate? And you're also looking at how are we taking the resources and expertise side of addressing a problem and merging those with the connection to community and the cultural competency side to ensure that we're having Latinos tap into those resources in a way that's relevant for them. So I think that that's fantastic. I want to put up a quick slide and share with our group that leads me into my next question. So what I put up here is, and this is probably some data that we're all familiar with and we've seen, but it really talks about the future of our country and the importance of Latinos as a population as you start thinking across the board on many areas. Certainly, higher ed, which we're talking about here in some indirect ways, very important piece to it. If you kind of look at the projections there, Latino students will fill up close to 40% of the bandwidth as the next decades start coming, which is an important part of the leadership, corporate and governmental leadership coming through Latinos, right, playing a bigger role there. This data speaks to us as consumers. And what does this mean when Latinos are almost 30% of the population and really still on a growth trajectory as we think about the growth of our population? I know here in Milwaukee, our study showed Latinos are responsible for 100% of the population growth and the net job growth in the area. And if you listen to the former Census Bureau Chief Steve Murdoch, who's over at Rice University now, one of the things that I think always sticks with me is he talks about the size of the Latino community and some of the sizes of the disparities that we have, and really how that impacts the United States overall, not just Latinos. By his estimates, if America is able to close the college disparity gap with Latinos, that median household income will rise across the board for everyone in the U.S., primarily based on consumer spending, increases in consumer spending. But if we're able to close that gap for Latinos, who wouldn't enjoy having a $10,000 greater median household income, thinking about the impact of Latinos? So I wanted to share that really just to get to the question for you of if we look at then some of these statistics, there's very many smart people that are saying, as Latino population goes, so will we all go. So you who are kind of immersed or at this crossroads of community and data, what do you say about that? Does that match what you're hearing and seeing in Minneapolis? And do you feel that people really understand how outcomes and the prosperity of the Latino community is tied to our overall prosperity?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. This is
And
a
I'll bring your
wonderful.
deck back up.
Right, thank you. This is a great question because we are living in Minnesota, and whenever we look at the statistics talk about the entire state compared to the rest of the country, Minnesota is always in the top tier of successful stories with one of the highest levels of graduation in college and access to housing and income level is very high, among the fifth we are as the state comparison takes place. But we are still looking at something that shows us a very large gap within the successful stories we can pick up along the road. That said, we are living in a state that is still majoritarily white. We do have over 79% of the entire population being white, and the diversity we do have is quite segmented. We do have, I said before, 5.5% of the population being Latinos, and 5.4% of the population being Black or African American, and the rest of the population very segmented. But when we see particular statistics, for example, high school graduation, and this is a statistic from 2018, and it seems like by 2020, according to the American Community Survey, things were worse a little bit, or more obvious, this gap. We see like Hispanic or Latino population is performing as the second worst group among all the ones who are listed here. American Indian traditionally doing that bad in graduation rates, and compared to whites, we do have this kind of big difference. Also, even when we see the Asian community, this is kind of a big problem, statistically speaking, because we do have there all people from ascendants from China, Korea, Japan doing fantastic. Even if we put them apart, it might be almost close to 100% graduation rate. As other communities like the Hmong or the Karen communities who are in the same group, they are doing really bad. So, but still, what I want to highlight here is that we do have statistics showing us that in the state that it is in general doing well, we do have largest gaps within our different community groups. That said, we are doing perhaps, and I was looking at your wellness report, the index for Latino communities in cities, and Minneapolis, and it's around the middle, sometimes 17, 18 city doing well with the Latino communities. That is, we are doing well indeed, but not as well as supposedly we would have doing if we are following the same pattern as other communities like the white ones. And we do have these indicators like the high school graduation on time, right? It is one. The next slide is telling us about what it is, the bachelor's degree. And you see there the gap is even more obvious. So while Asian community, was saying with that caveat of not having that differentiation, is doing over 40% of the population with a bachelor's degree at least. Latinos, we cannot reach even 20%. We are around 17% of our population having this kind of education level. And that is something we are completely interested. Here in Minnesota, it's kind of obvious that the level of wellness that state registered in the national concert is also hiding these needs that we do have for the communities of color. And that said, it's still kind of hard to tell them that we need to look at these communities for us to do better. Paul Wellstone, who is a politician, very famous here from Minnesota, he was saying that everyone is going to be okay when everyone is okay. And that said, we are always interacting with so many different factors and many different associations and organizations in order for us to work together to improve these indicators. It's not that we are doing bad as Latino communities in the national concert, but still we are not doing as good as the other communities such as the whites and Asian communities. and we need to do something. And next slide shows us somehow the really specific need we do have. If we were showing it, it has some animation because in the back of the pyramid we see in a little bit of darker blue what is the age distribution for Latinos in Minnesota. The blue ones are males and the red ones are females. And you see there, we do have a big proportion of population being very young in the state, while the distribution by age, which is in the top, represents the white population. We see there, we are looking at the reduction of the base. The youngest ages are less, and I was just thinking about that when I was seeing the graph that you were showing, Nancy. The white population is even decreasing because they are having this natural growth rate in negative numbers now. So what is that? We are seeing more young people from diverse communities, and particularly Latino communities, who are in very big need of being prepared in the very best way possible in order for them to serve the society they are going to be interacting with in all the terms with good engineers, good medical doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, and engineers, which we don't have yet. So this is pretty much the argument we are bringing to our partners. We need to change this. We need to work with our younger generations, in order for us to see these people even serving you when you are going to be older. Because you see in the top of the pyramid, which is the population pyramid here, the elder population is growing in percentage, and that means we are going to be there with high needs, very, very important needs, that if we don't work with our younger communities of color, then we are not going to have those who are going to help us to transit or navigate our elder stage in our life. Today we do have around 3.54 people working with each elder in this state. If the trend that we see right now continues, we are going to have just one person working with one elder, and it's going to be terrible because there are not going to be those other 2.5 people prepared to work with elders. So just that is telling us that we need to really focus on changing the trends or the evidences we do have previously shown. So I don't know if that answered your question in full, but this is what I have.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. And those are many of the things that we think about here with our Latino population. I will share with you our index. We have updated the index one time now based on new data. And originally, Milwaukee, when we first started this with 2016 data, Milwaukee was 39th out of 50 cities. And now we are 44th with the latest updated data that the census put out, which was 2018 data. And many of that was exactly as you talked about. While we have improvements in 18 out of our 20 variables rolling into the index, they weren't improvements on par with even how Latinos were changing in other communities. So we're moving, but we weren't moving fast enough. And as we compare Latino growth in some of these areas to growth from our Caucasian populations, certainly it presents that same piece not as good as the others. And that's an important part, especially as you look at this population pyramid. How do we help the community, right? How do we help the corporate community, philanthropic community really understand the urgency of, if we look at the bottom of this period, those are our Latinos in there, and they really have to help carry the future growth and prosperity and service needs of our economy. So, I know that there isn't a simple answer, but how do we cut through the noise and encourage out of the box thinking and really get the attention and resources that we need for Latino issues, whether that's upskilling or reskilling or closing the education gap, or any number of these pieces as we look at in our communities, whether they're micro or macro. How do we do that in Minneapolis, in Milwaukee, and elsewhere in the U.S.?
Well, that is the question that if I can answer, I'm going to have everything solved in the future. But yes, I'll say I've been sensing big changes in the perception of the importance of these communities here in the state. We do have even some offices and people who are working in those offices who are very sensible, very aware about these needs. And they are starting to create some sort of groups that are supporting this kind of, first the research to really position what is the actual need, and then they are supporting actions that are working towards changing things. We are seeing large coalitions of foundations, for example, and for that, the prosperity funding still exists here, and they are bringing together different foundations. And I guess those are our first people we need to talk to, approach to, and say, please, let's work together. We're working currently with the Minneapolis Foundation, the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundations, the Northwest Area Foundations, who are leading this group. And they are very much aware of this, and they are even changing their leadership. Now we do have more people of color leading those foundations, and that said, it's also bringing more attention to what are the actual needs of our communities of color in the state. Therefore, we need to push them and to see what are the real actions, or the actions that are going to be really working, and not in order to change a little bit the traditional way they fund these communities and they support those communities. We are in constant dialogue with them, but also, and I was mentioning working also, I was working in North Dakota and Iowa, and very soon again in Wisconsin. I guess we need to bring different actors and different foundations together from those different states, because you were mentioning before, Nancy, we share several issues in Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Dakotas for the Latino communities, and it's important now to establish some commitment that goes beyond the borders. For us to do that, we need to really start actions like this, us coming together and creating new projects. I can tell you in the past, we get together with organizations in Baltimore, in Florida, in Texas, and developed 3 Latino Leadership Academies here in Midwest. It was openly supported by many different foundations, a total success, and many of those leaders who were coming out from those academies are now leaders in even those foundations I was mentioning. So I guess that is very much needed. We also need to be more proactive ourselves in creating these kind of ideas, of this sort of say get together ideas and work all together in order for us to create more awareness and more say results that are visible and tangible.
Gracias, Rodolfo. So I want to remind everyone we will be taking questions for the audience. I'm going to shift to a question from the audience right now, but we might have time for 1 or 2 more. So if anyone has a question for Rodolfo about the data that we saw, or HACER, or some of the trends that we're talking about, please feel free to add those into the questions or into chat. We are monitoring those, so we will get to them as soon as we can. And Rodolfo, I want to ask you the first question from the audience here. So HACER is in Minneapolis, and certainly over this last year, the audience member wants to know you're kind of at the epicenter of some of the social justice movements that have happened, started from the epicenter of Minneapolis and really rippled out across the United States. We have very Latino community, they write, has a lot of similarities, especially in the disparities that we're talking about with the African American community. So, kind of share with us a little bit about what this last year, year and a half was like for HACER as a Latino organization in Minneapolis, and how do you help leverage your work for some of the similar issues that we face with the African American community? Hope I did that question justice. Thank you for the question. So Rodolfo, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is really interesting because, yes, in fact, the events that were consequence of the murder of Mr. George Floyd generated a very unique movement where even, the famous picture, the mural of George Floyd, that it is now permanently there in the street. He was killed. It was made by a coalition of Latino artists. It was a spontaneous manifestation of solidarity and understanding and coming together towards some issue that was affecting this community as well, as in very same way the African American community is being affected. And that's it. Here in Minnesota, particularly in the Twin Cities area, because we work in the Twin Cities as a unit, so to speak, and it's not only Minneapolis, but also St. Paul, we had to answer to these consequences of mobilization and affectation, because so many people were being affected by the mobilizations. And even we saw one famous business named Lobo Rodeo, who was a gathering place for Latino communities, falling down because of the fire that was initiated in there without any kind of clear justification or reason, but they happened within the context of this mobilization. So we were working together with the Latino communities for us, everybody, to really understand what was really happening within this context of protest and mobilization, social mobilization, and how we should participate with it. We engage with different authorities, locally speaking, in order to create some interaction and communication with the people. And we work with the City Council of Minneapolis, particularly, in bringing them together for them to inform the population in general, and trying to avoid some sort of misunderstandings and the diffusion of fake news. Sorry for using that term, but news that were instigating to the confrontation. We also brought a lot of resources to different people. We connected with other Latino serving organizations such as Latino Economic Development Center and so many others, Centro, Tyrone Guzman, in order for us to create this network that responded to specific needs that our communities may have at any moment. And that network worked very well. We altogether served around 40,000 people during the crisis time. And today, along this year, where we see colluding the social movements and the health crisis, we've been generating a safety network for our communities, serving them with many different products and connection to resources all over around. So yeah, this is what has been our year. I've seen a lot of work that it's being coordinated and bringing together different organizations that in the past we were not working together. And we are now reaching out further communities that are not necessarily all concentrated in the metro area, but also statewide. And they are knowing, they are learning now that we are all together and we can work all together. That is pretty much, I hope that answered the question, but yes, it's the consequence of that and so many other things that are happening here in Minnesota.
So thank you, Rodolfo. And I did not know that the mural was, as you describe, kind of this spontaneous response from Latino artists. That's very, I get a little goosebumps, I think, when I heard that. It's very heartwarming and certainly talks about some of the solidarity, and I'm happy to see that it's helping to spur more collaboration, which I think is something that we strive for here in Milwaukee too. How do we take the Latino power and African American power and address some of those similar issues that we have? So I'm very interested as that progresses to hear more about how those collaborations move forward. So we have time for one more quick question from the audience here. The question that we have, Rodolfo, is what is the budget of your organization, HACER, and what are some of the sources of funding?
Well, thank you. Yeah, the budget is right now around $1.5 million and comes from a diversity of sources. We do have contracts with governmental agencies here, locally speaking. We do have a grant from CDC Foundation to work on issues related to vaccines in general. But we have also support from the city of Minneapolis, city of St. Paul, the counties of Ramsey, Hennepin, Sibley, several other counties in the state. And we have also some grants that are coming from small foundations such as the Southwestern Area Foundation and Northwestern Area Foundation. We have contracts with SMERLS and also with local organizations in the state. And recently we do have more small contracts with private companies and organizations. Target is hiring us to do a study. So it's very diverse the way we do have these resources. All in all, we are working on 36 different projects right now, all of them funded. So yeah, that's why we do have this budget for us to work this year. And I hope we can maintain it for the following years.
So thank you so much, Rodolfo. We also hope that you can maintain that budget and grow that budget because we think that your work is very, very important. So for this past 55 minutes or so, we have been speaking with Rodolfo Gutierrez, who is the executive director of HACER, a very unique organization that really is helping change, I think, the landscape, not just for Latinos in Minnesota and some other surrounding states, but really for everyone in there, as we've kind of looked at data over this past hour that reaffirms what some very smart people say. As Latinos go, because of the size and demographics of our population, so will we all. So we really want to thank Rodolfo for being with us. Rodolfo, again, has a bachelor's and PhD in history and a master's in demography and extensive experience, him and his team, on research and demographic change and quantitative and qualitative research. And we thank you very much for sharing that with us over these past 55 minutes and giving us a glimpse of what's happening in Minneapolis and what you are seeing from a data perspective, and how we have similarities to what we also see here in the Milwaukee and Wisconsin area. Right now it is 8:55. We have another upcoming panel at 9 a.m. and we are sharing. We have built in mini breaks for you. We know that from 8 to 1 o'clock is a long time frame for anybody to sit or stand in front of their computer. And so at 9 a.m., we're going to give everybody a short break right now, maybe check emails, get another cup of coffee, whatever that is. We hope many of you will stay tuned in with us at 9 a.m., where we're going to be joined by Sandra Dempsey and hear some stories from real Latino households in Milwaukee and what has been their experience over the past year and a half at this point. So what you see on screen right now is what you will have until 9 a.m. And at 9 a.m., you'll hear us come back in and we will introduce our moderator and go into the next hour of stories and information that we hope will continue to share the voice of Latinos and the stories of Latinos from Milwaukee and broader. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a few minutes.